Chicago. So I did prepare. I get a lot of time to prepare, but it is weather. They rerouted us north over Toronto in order to get down. So everything was backed up. So I did have time, but it is a little bit difficult to prepare on the plane. But let's see where we're up to now. We are 809. What? Hey, Ralph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines to the bottom. So the Gemara is going into principle, which was mentioned in Mishnah, that in order to be chayav the parha lim davar, in order to be liable for the score brought by basin on their iniquity, they have to rule in a fashion which eliminates part of a mitzvah from the Torah, but not a complete mitzvah from the Torah. If they eliminate a complete mitzvah from the Torah, there is no carbon, only if they eliminate part of a mitzvah. So now it's clearly in the next Gemara from where we're beginning to the Mishnah, there clearly is an obvious and blatant mess. In other words, the Gemara is all messed up, the Gersh is all messed up. And the truth is, we really should do a lot of cutting and pasting, but we're not going to do it because it'll just get confusing. So therefore, I'm just going to, you'll understand, you'll see that the Gemara has redundancies and doubles back on itself. So therefore, I'm not going to bother doing the cutting and pasting, but I'll try and make it as painless as possible. Okay, so the Gemara starts, Velonim says, okay, it should be called a shchita here is totally superfluous. The word shchita is interesting, mashbiach, it's a whole long piece trying to figure out how the word shchita got in here, right? Because shchita wasn't discussed in our Mishnah as being one of the issues, right? So he wanted to say it actually said Shem Yitzia, and somehow the bottom of the mem got erased, and the side turned to a test. But the simple way, however it happened, it should say, V'loim says, Oker kol Shem Hotzah. The Gemara Mishnah said that Shabbos, they can't say there's no Shabbos, so that's Oker kol Aguf. They're eradicating the entire mitzvah. That won't do, right? So they have to be Oker. So the Mishnah proposed they're Oker, one specific malacha. One of the malachas they say doesn't apply. Which one? The Mishnah gave an example, Hotzah. So the Gemara is asking on that, what about an Hotzah itself? The Hotzah itself, aren't you uprooting the entire prohibition of Hotzah? Hotzah is one of the specific prohibitions of Shabbos, one of the specific malachas. If you uproot that, you're uprooting an entire goof, an entire malacha, right? So it says the Gemara, Shmuel bar Abba Amar, Shmuel bar Abba said a very interesting chiddush. Amru Amma muter shtei amos mutar asuros. Gemara's going to come back to this later on. But what they said, you're not allowed to carry one amma, but you're allowed to carry 2 amos. Now, what drives people up the wall about this is what happened to Dalit amos, right? Where's this 1 amma, 2 amma business, right? It's not a 1 amma or 2 amos, it's Dalit amos. Okay, so it's a kasher. Why the Gemara picked 1 or 2 amos should be 3 or 4 or 4 or 5. But that's not so. One could live with such a kasher. Okay, it does make things a little bit difficult, but that's what they said. They said part of Otzah is mutter, meaning 1 amos mutter. Part of Otzah is also meaning 2 amos are also. Or they could have said 4 and 5, whatever the case may be. Okay, but now we're going to come back to it later on. Right now, we'll leave it, let it stand. We go to the next thing the Mishnah mentioned, about they were matir avodah zarah, to bow down to avodah zarah, right? So it says more about avodah zarah, it said, so they're bowing down to avodah zarah is in itself a specific prohibition of avodah zarah. But let him say it's oker kol yishem yishtach avoya, aren't you putting the entire concept of bowing down? So it says more, they said you're allowed to bow down, but you're not allowed to bend over. So the Pnei Moshe said it should be the opposite. You're not allowed to bend over, but you are allowed to bend over, but you're not allowed to bow down. Because bowing means full prostration on the ground. So that's the Yerushalmi of the sides questions whether maybe we can learn it the way it is here. Well, that's not material to us. The bottom line is whatever they asked, one movement of bowing down, not the other movement. Now, the Gemara goes back to Hotzah again, and that's why it's obvious that there's some sort of, choppiness here. But the Gemara goes back to Hotzah. The Gemara asks the same question again. Again, the Gemara asks the same question. If they uprooted Hotzah, as it says in the Mishnah, aren't they uprooting an entire malach of Shabbos? So here we have a different answer. So Amar Yishua bar Yitzchak, Now here the better Girsa is not the Girsa in the Gemara, but the Girsa in the bottom, the Gilin of Frying. So take a look there in the Gilin of Frying, the very bottom, left hand part of the page. So the Gemara here gives a different answer than they gave before. The Gemara says, answer is that they said it's permitted to take stuff out of Rishus HaYochid into Rishus HaRabim. It's prohibited to take stuff from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYochid. Okay? So it says, As you command Amar, this I'm continuing Gilin Ephraim. As you command Amar, that goes good according to being that holds Achnos Avotza Achasi. That Achnos Avotza one malacha, so therefore you take off half of it, so you're not Oker Kol Aguf. Because you're taking off Hachnosa or Hotzor off of the entirety of Hachnosa Hotzor. Ram, however, command the Marach Nosa Hotzor Shtayim Aim, but according to Bin, which shows Hachnosa and Hotzor are two separate malachas, Loim Tzorker Kol Shem Hotzor, aren't you uprooting whatever's called Hotzor, you're uprooting, because he would learn that Hotzor and Hachnosa are two different malachas. So it says, Rabbi Shimba Rebbe, or Shimon somebody or other. Shimon Shmuel Rabbi Yitzchak. Yitzchak said, "B'she'amru gogeres muteres u'shtei grogos esus." He gives a similar answer to the one we gave before. So before it said 1 amma versus 2 ammas. He says 1 grogeres, which is a dateful, versus 2 grogros, which is 2 datefuls. Now, halacha is in fact 1 grogeres. But it basically said, they gave it this dichotomy of 1 versus 2. And again, the Gemara is going to come back to that as well. Okay, let's start talking about base now. And we're in the second line, that's we're picking up at the end of the second line. Rabbi Yossi said, Lo shoru shemuta lechol chelav. Now, this is a very difficult Gemara. Whatever people say here, I don't like. So therefore, I want to say like this, that chelav is not serving as a specific example, but rather it's because chelav was never mentioned previously. We're really going to so much in Mishnah. But whenever the Gemara wants to talk about a generic chatos, it calls it a chatos chelav. You ever notice that? A generic chatos is a chatos brought for chelav and dam, because chelav and dam are classical, archetypical isurim, right? Which are archetypical isurim, which denote us a lav which has kares, for which you bring a korban, right? If you did b'shogeg, right? So too, that's where when based in paskin something, has to be a lav, which would have kares, which they paskin erroneously, and they bring a korban for that. So the Gemara is citing chelev as an archetype. So Rabbi Yossi said, Lo shoru shemuta lechol chelev. You know what? We don't have to say that they paskin it's mutar to eat chelev. That's not what the necessary hurrah which we're looking for. Rather, it's even possible that they knew based in that it was also to eat chelev. But they thought that the Torah gave them leeway that the Torah gave them leeway to divide the Isser. Meaning to say, well, chelev is also, but not this chelev. Or chelev is also, but not this shiur. So even that is considered to be the type of mistake which is not a kiras kol haguf, and rather something which is kiras miktaso, a partial akira. Now, what is that partial akira which based in paskin? Rabbi Rechia asked, is it, now the truth is, I would say they'd like to say that this boy is a statement. He was explaining. In other words, we have occasionally in Yerushalmi where a boy is a statement, so I think this one is a statement. So he said, what do we mean by basing new was also, but they tampered with the prohibition. They thought they could be more about the prohibition. It means either kizayis, or, and this is my chiddush also, I think it's like either or, not kizayis ayom ukshne zeisim or, but either kizayis or ayom, or versus either kishne zeisim or lemachar. Okay? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that word, what do I think the Gemara means by that? It means that their row was, it's also on Tuesdays to eat chelev, but it's mutar on Wednesdays to eat chelev. Or it's also to eat one kazayis of chelab, but it's mutter it's also to eat two kazayis of chelab, but it's all mutter to eat one kazayis of chelab. They thought that the Torah, yes, asur chelab, but they still had leeway to wiggle around within the prohibition of chelab. That is Akira's miktsas aguf. Okay? So the Lamaisa, they're tampering with the shiur and with the time. That's what they're tampering with. Okay? So it says, what's an example of this? Right, now, if you're going to hold this as a question, so the Shaita, so if the boy Rabbi Chia Bar Bumrach is a question, then the Shaita so correctly changes Hechavida to Nishmina Min Hadah. That this is not a sample, rather a resolution. Let's learn out from here. Novi, this is a Novi Sheker, a false prophet, Umediach, and a person who's a missionary, seducing you to worship Avodah Zarah. And so Allah says they tell you not to listen to any mitzvah in the Torah, you put him to death. So what about Yochlim Yom L'chal Titin Filin Hayoim Tein L'mochar? What if the Navi Sheker, the false prophet, or the missionary comes in and says, you don't have to put on film today, put it on tomorrow, right? Just for today, not. Tomorrow you can put it on, right? So, there should it be, now here the Pshar is so changed, and I think this change is necessary, even though it's a difficult one. He says, instead of Tishma Lehem, should you listen to them? Obviously you're not supposed to listen to them. Rather, change it should be, Hey Chayav. Are they going to be liable under these circumstances? No, the Pasuk says, you should not listen to any mitzvah which should tell you not to go. Rather, you should go in them. Bohem means in their entirety. In their entirety, not a part of them. So vice versa. If they tell you, if they tell you not to go in one of these mitzvahs, which Kodesh Baruch Hu told you lech, so it's if they told you not to do a mitzvah in its entirety, are they liable to a death penalty? If they told you only to not do part of a mitzvah, they're not liable to a death penalty. Okay, so so this is a proof, of course, or either it's example or a proof of the principle we stated previously, that akiras kol guf is only if you oker it forever. And also if you, it's whatever shiur it is, right, in its entirety, but not if you do partial akira, to part of the shiur or part of the time. So it says, that only if you said, Harei akarta shenko so davar, so the Gemara says, no. Harei akarta shenko also o yom. But even though it's not a refutation, it's continuation of the explanation. Even though you are uprooted the entire day, nevertheless the same we say ain't kind of akiras kol guf, right? It's not akiras kol guf, and therefore you're not the Navi Sheker or the mace is not liable. The kohen kind of akiras kol guf, and the same thing is true by Haraz based in. That are based in Paskin, then it's the flip side, obviously. A Navi or Mesis or Mediach is only chayiv if they persuade you to forsake the entire mitzvah. The base is only chayiv if they Paskin on part of the mitzvah, right? So, but it's the we're looking for partial mitzvahs in both cases, okay? Ramona Shamalar, Ramona derived this, which here says me in the Basra, from later on, but it really makes no sense. Shadrzal changes to mean ka from here, from the same we had previously. Shmuel Bar Ba, I'm not sure how we could write for Namora this business, but we derive for that with Shmuel Bar Ba said Ranav. Shmuel Bar Ba Amar B'Shu Amra Am Muteres Shtamos Asuros. So we already learned this principle, not just in terms of days, but in terms of shiur. Right, because he said, Rav Shmuel Bar Ba said, what's the case of the Oiker Miktsas Otzah, not Kol Otzah, where they're putting part of Otzah, not all Otzah, where they conceded that one Amma is, that two Ammas is also. The only answer, they said, that one Amma is Mutter, right? So that's Akir, Harei Akarta Shem Kol Otzah Amma, and that you uprooted that entire name of an Amma, yet nevertheless, the same ain't Karakiras Kol Aguf, right? There is no uprooting the entire body. So too, in terms of shiur, there is no pruning, and we come to the conclusion that Rabbi Yossi is correct, and according to Rabbi Boom Bar Chia's analysis, that Akiras Kol Guf is only to uproot the entire shiur over the entire course of time. But if you give a partial shiur or partial time, in which it's mutter versus when it's also, so then that's why it's an Akiras Kol Guf, but it's only Akira of part of it, uprooting part of it, and base is going to be liable for a korban on that. Okay? Not bad? Okay. So it says more Mishnah for, they said there's clearly some cutting paste to be done, but alright. Chora base of Yod Echamem Shato. Based in Paskin, one of them knew they made a mistake. Varmalem, he said to them, Toimatem, you are mistaken. O Shaloya Mufla Shal Beis in Sham, or the outstanding scholar Sanhedrin was not there. Now, there's a whole issue. It's a very long Margolis Sanhedrin, and of course I didn't have it on the plane. But the Margolis Sanhedrin has a whole long discussion of whether Mufla in Basin, so the outstanding scholar Basin, whether he normally participates in votes or not. Or is he like the vice president in the Senate, right? So there's a long discussion of that, which is going to a little bit germane to this. But in any event, if he wasn't there, or Shoya Echomem, or one of the men said was a ger, was a convert, or mamzer, or a mamzer, or nasin, or a Gibeonite, or zakin shloya robonim, or an old man who never had any kids who were not suitable to sin in Sanhedrin, I raise a potter. So if the Sanhedrin is exempt, because the psak was not a valid psak, because the Sanhedrin was not a proper complement of members. Shneimar kan Eda, it says Eda, v'neimar lahalon Eda, and it says Eda elsewhere, in terms of a basin. Malahalon, Maida Muralahan Kulam Brin Lalaroy. This like elsewhere say about they're all suitable to Paskin. Afeda Murakan, so the Eda Mechir Kulam Brin Lalaroy, they have to be suitable to Paskin. Masisa the Rebbe. Our Mishnah is like Rebbe. The Rebbe Amar, Rebbe said, Ein l'chamaki vel muzla shel beisim avad. Who's the person who is essential? The person who is essential is the person, as Rashi, the Pnei Moshe brings down, the Einei Eda is the eyes of the congregation, the muzla shel beisim. If he's not around, the psak is not a valid psak. See, because it says, V'yoyim me'einei Eda, Misha Sudi from the eyes of the congregation, Misha of the assembly, Misha also a naim later, somebody who was made to be the eyes of the assembly. See, it says, V'syatzu shamimach. It says they should gather there with you. Ma'at, the elders to be appointed as members of Sanhedrin. Ma'at, just like you, lo ger, not a convert, lo nasi, not a Gibeonite, lo mamzer, not a mamzer. Apain, so today, gerim, they cannot be lo gerim, they cannot be gerim, lo nasinim, nor not converts, nor Gibeonites, nor mamzerim, nor avanim, and not slaves to boot. So it says more a very cryptic question. Nicha ger. Okay, but our Mishnah said they appointed a ger anyway. It says, Nicha ger, I understand a ger, but mamzer. Based in Mani mamzerim, there's based in appointed mamzerim. They obviously, for Reb Chaim Zimmerman's famous joke about the president of Skokie Yeshiva, right? So, okay, you never heard the joke? I don't know if I should say it on tape.
You will have to say that. You're just
what?
Just what you're just saying now.
So Lamaisa, so I understand that the ger. I understand that a ger somehow can become Meretz Sanhedrin. Now all them should go crazy. What's the difference between ger and mamzer? What's the difference? If they couldn't appoint a ger, they can't appoint a mamzer. They can't appoint a mamzer. Can't appoint a ger. So the truth is, I think historically that actually Shmai and Avtalim were gerim. They were certainly children of gerim. I think they might have been gerim themselves. So in fact, there were historically members of Sanhedrin like a Rosh Shah who were gerim. I don't know if they had full voting rights. I don't know if that's true. They had full voting rights, but they were certainly members of the Sanhedrin, in terms of the discussion. Shmai and Avtalim with Rosh Hashanah, the Nasi and Basin. So the Gemara is asking, but a mamzer for sure we wouldn't do. And I don't know how the Gemara knows that, either public policy wouldn't do it or there's some limud for it, but that's the Gemara's kasha. How do you ever shout that there's the point that they made such a mistake, that they appointed mamzerim in the Sanhedrin, that you tell me that if the Sanhedrin includes mamzerim, then their psak is not valid. It's posted in mamzerim by a basin. Rav Huna Amar b'shavru minu taka would be an aveira if they did it, but they did it. Okay, so again, that sounds like a beger. It's not an aveira. It's not, it might not be fully valid, but it's not an aveira. Rabbi Chanina and Raimon had a machlokas. Now the truth is, what they're arguing about is very cryptic. They don't really say what they're arguing about. So I would like to propose the Mashbiach, before I propose my proposal, Mashbiach says they're arguing, if a ger or mamzer, whatever these people are, who patters the base of bringing korban, is one of the 70 or is not one of the 70. Okay, that's the issue which you're arguing about. Okay, in other words, if he's present, is that enough to pat the Sanhedrin if he participate in deliberations? Or is he also to be part of the number 70 in order to exempt the Sanhedrin from bringing a korban, because then the deliberations were not carried on by a valid body of judges. That's what explains the machlokas. One says he was one of the 70, and the other says he's not part of 70. My own shot, what I would like to say, is that actually they're not arguing on Mishnah at all, but they're arguing based on the immediately preceding Gemara, which is when the see a ger wasn't pointed as a member of the Sanhedrin. When a ger was appointed as a member of the Sanhedrin, such as Shmai and Avtalion, what was their status? Were they part of the 70 or are they not part of the 70? That's the issue, okay? So it says more, top of Vavam Rav, Mandamar Chutz Shivim, who says they're outside the 70, Nicha. It makes sense, but according to me, it means that obviously Shmai and Avtalion would not be part of the count of 70. According to Mashbiach, it means that they would not be part of the 70, and they were deliberating from outside the body of 70. Mandamar Toch Shivim. But he who said they're part of 70, they're part of the 70, right, which according to me means that the Gerim were made part of the 70 people in terms of, whatever they were used in those special times. And according to Mashbiach also, they were made part and parcel of the 70, right? However, why do you say, Chutz Shivim lo? Why didn't he say that they were not part of the 70? Why do you say Tafka part of the 70? So it says more So it says the Gemara, again, according to Mashbiach, the reason why he wanted to make it clear, the reason why they have to be dafka part of the 70, because otherwise they wouldn't pater the Sanhedrin from their korban. Because if they're outside the 70, they wouldn't be suitable to paskin, and they'd be like a stone which was there. Maybe it's like a talking stone, but they'd still be like a stone. And therefore, whatever statements they make would be meaningless, and therefore, how could they possibly pater the rest of the Sanhedrin from a korban? So therefore, he held our Mishnah's dafka toy by the case with those people, Ger or Mamzer, or whoever it was, I said two, but not two, even one, were made dafka members of the Sanhedrin only in that fashion, were they actually going to pater the Sanhedrin being korban. According to me, the way I wanted to learn it, is whether it's going on how we appoint Gerim, so then the way, according to I want to learn it, that that he's explaining, the man that holds it with Toshivim is explaining why they dafka made them a member of the 70. Because if the Ger or Mamza was not made a member of the 70, he wouldn't have the right to open his mouth. Right? If he was outside the 70, he would be not able to open his mouth and participate in deliberations. So therefore they dafka to make him a member of the 70 in order to allow him to participate as full member. Now when they took the vote, again this is going according to my theory that Gemara here is expounding on how say Shmai and Avtalion become members of the Sanhedrin. Where they took the vote, I don't know if they included these people in the vote. It could be that the vote are only 68, but for deliberations they have to be formally part of the 70. Okay? What? It says that a Talmud actually, we learn in Sanhedrin, a Talmud can't contribute, it says he has something legitimate to say, they can appoint him to the Sanhedrin. Do you remember that? In other words, they said in the Sanhedrin, if he had something important to say, they could appoint him to the member of the Sanhedrin. But it seems as a Talmud, you couldn't actually say something. Okay?
So it's something like observer status, like...
Right, that's the issue basically. So the way I'm learning the Gemara is discussing whether that observer status. I mean, truth is mashbiach, and I learned more in that respect the same way, whether they had observer status or they were actually members of the deliberative body. But when it comes to the issue at the end, when this line became Shem Roy Lo Roy Nasa Kevin, that's explaining, according to the mashbiach, why they were included as members of Sanhedrin to begin with, in order to explain why in our Mishnah they impede upon the Beis Din from being chayav korban, since they are members of the deliberative body, and they would not impede if they were not members of the deliberative body. According to me, it's explaining why you would want to appoint Gerim as members of Sanhedrin, right, in order they should be able to speak their mind, which they couldn't do otherwise. It's almost exactly the same thing. Halachei. If the basin paskin unintentionally, vasu kol shogegin, and all of the community did their avera unintentionally following basin, right? Mivim par, so basin brings a bull on behalf of the entire congregation. Mizidin vasu shogegin, if basin paskin intentionally wrong, and even though the community was inadvertently followed them, right? So then, Mivin Kisba O Seira. They bring a lamb or a goat. Female lamb or female goat. Oser Shogin, if also Mizin and Basin Basque unintentionally wrong. And the community followed them knowing that they were wrong. They were amazed that Harelu Ptur in the basin doesn't bring a korban either. Because it's the shogi has to be shogi both of the basin and of the members of the community. Says Ma'anostat. Later the plea of Shimon Lakish doesn't start with Lakish. The Rabbi Yamashim Shimon Lakish said Mariam is the name of Lakish Lakish. We learned this the first 9 Horayos. Mastisa going Shimon Asa Yeshuv name. When is it Shaykh somebody who's amazed? In other words, that based in Paskin unintentionally wrong thing, and guy amazed went and did it anyway. So he said the first night, Shimon ben Azai, he was a great Talmud. He would know when Beis Din made a mistake. And he would know, like Yerushalmi Shita, that it's forbidden to listen to Beis Din when they're making a mistake. Because only if they tell you, Yomin Val Smo Shul Smo, not if they tell you Yomin Shul Smo Val Smo Shul Yomin, right? But how is it Shaykh, Masnisa, Kigon, the Shimon Aza Yoshel Vifneim, our mission is going to be like Shimon Aza Yoshel Vifneim, and should be in Semizin Vasu Sholim Vishogin Vasu Mizidin. So one long run on question. V'chiyei Zodon L'Shkoga L'Yochi Yetz Haroyos Basin. How can you say that all of Am Yisrael are uber chachamim? They're smarter than Beis Din. In other words, I understand it's shaykh that Shimon Azai is better smarter than Beis Din, because he was brilliant and he knew all these things, perhaps better than members of Sanhedrin. But he was saying that the Beis Din were shoygeg, and Am Yisrael knowingly went and transgressed Aved. That means that the Beis Din of Sanhedrin, the Beis Din of Sanhedrin is are political hacks and morons, and the people are smarter. That happens in the United States, but hopefully it doesn't happen in Sanhedrin, right? So it says the Gemara, Chavraya B'Shem, this is a special entrance exam in the Knesset. Okay, Chavraya B'Shem Lakish. Chavraya B'Shem Lakish said, Shelo Kiblu Rov Tzibur Aleihem. It's talking about a case where the tzibur did not intentionally, they didn't verbalize their projection of basin. They weren't makabel the raw. They never were makabel. It's like the opposite of Shem and Akum, the converse of Shem and Akum, which we had back in Avodah Zarah, where Klal Yisrael didn't accept a gzeira l'chumra of Beis Din. They didn't accept the kula of Beis Din, right? They like the Beis Din passed in Shabbat over 5 minutes after Shkia. So nobody started knowing like that. So that's called Mazidin. Okay? I know you'd like that. Okay, so in any event...
I hate the things that will never occur.
What? Yeah. So, but that was such a case. Says, Rabbi Zira says a different approach. He says, Rabbi Zira says, b'shebatu ba'alayosan, when they rebelled against Beis Din Psak. In other words, not just they weren't noikit, but they rebelled against Beis Din Psak. The Beis Din came in Paskin, that you're allowed to, let's say, the famous case of the Tztoki in Sukkah, right? The Tztoki who poured the water of Nisuch HaMayim on his feet instead of pouring them in his back, right? And they stoned him with their Esroigim. Remember that one? So let's say something that happened based in passing away. The people retaliated against that. Okay? So what's the difference between the two positions? Whether Basin was not the tzibur was not makabel, the tzibur was mevato. The nafkamina, the ramifications of the following case: kibul leim v'chazru ubatu. They accepted upon themselves at one point to adhere to Basin's new line, but then they rebelled against it subsequently. It should be Aldaited Rabbi Zira, switching the names here. Rabbi Zira came at Shabbatu, Turin. Once they kicked it off, even though originally they makabel it, so then Basin becomes part of a korban, because they say we can't bring a korban. These people rebelled against Psak. Aldaited, according to it should be the Chevraya, according to the Chevraya, since it became Shkibuleim Mishor Rishon, since initially the Klai so accepted the new Kula based in, so therefore from that point in time the Beis Din becomes Chayav to bring its own korban, even later on Am Yisrael reneged on its acceptance of that new Kula. Okay? Horo Beis Din. Now what's interesting, there's a little shifting of gears here. Horo Beis Din also Kolakol. Beis Din Paskin and all the entire congregation sin, or Ruban and the majority of the congregation sin. Our PM based on their say so. The Empire, they bring, according to Tanakama, who's Remeir, one bull. Okay? If they committed the Avera of idolatry, the Empire decided to bring one bull and one goat. Divi Rabbi Meir. Okay? Rabbi Meir, no, Shneimos Shvatim Meviim Shneimos Parim. Each of the Shvatim brings its own bull. In other words, it's 12 korbanos altogether. So it's interesting. He concedes that it's because of Beis Din, but it gets carried out in being 12 separate korbanos, not the korban of Beis Din itself. Okay, but Avodah they come in Avodah Zarah, Shneimos Shvatim, the 12 tribes bring Shneimos Parim, 12 bulls, Shneimos Suriyim, and 12 goats. Rabbi Shimon says it's Shloshos Parim. No, it's 13 bulls, because each Shev brings and Beis Din brings to boot. Okay? So therefore it's 13 altogether. Well, but you bring 13 bulls and Shlosha Soshim and 13 goats. The soil will call Shevet to Shevet, the soil of Beis Din. There's a soil for each and every Shevet and a soil for Beis Din as well. Okay? Says Mantano Roiv. Who's the author of Mishnah says Roiv HaKol, the majority of the congregation. Okay, says Mary. It's going to Meir. The Tani we learn Meir. It's actually going to be more clarified next Mishnah. Tani he macht his korshvatim. Makes them. It's only 6 tribes. He macht his kol shever, or half of each one of the 12 tribes. Will be a vad rov. The bottom line is you need to have a majority of the congregation. Okay. You don't have to need the majority of Shvatim, but you have the majority of the congregation. That's according to Meir.
So it's popular vote versus what? 12?
Right, something like that. I don't know, not exactly, but
you can have the majority of the congregation and yet not have
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, right, you're right. Okay. So it says, it says, Chatzi kol shevet, it could be half of every shevet. But it has to be Uvad Rov Shvatim Shleim as the majority of all the Shvatim. Meaning, well, not meaning. And another statement is Shevet Echel Gorakol Shvatim. One Shevet drags in all the other Shvatim. The Gemara is going to explain that later on. Okay? So he holds that either you need the majority of the congregation, right, or the majority of the Shvatim. Okay? So you have to have rov of the shvatim, right, and or rov of the kol. That's a shevet el shvatim. One shevet can drag in everybody else, right? Meir says Kol Shvatim Kruyim Kol. Rameir obviously holds all the Shvatim together are called a Kol. So everything goes by like you put it the popular vote. Rameir Kol Shevet Shevet you call it Kol. The way you put it to the electoral vote, each Shevet is judged independently. So therefore you're going to have as well, Kol Shevet Shevet Kol Kol, and also the entire congregation is called a Kol, as the Gemara will clarify later on. So it's either majority of Shvatim, 7 out of 12, even if it's not actually a majority of the people, or it's a majority of the people. Okay? Now, it says, Asid Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon holds like Yehuda. Come on, Rabbi Yehuda, Mer Kol Shevet Shevet Kol Kol. Just like it says, each Shevet by itself is called a Kol. It's called a Kol. Can Rabbi Shimon Omer Kol Shevet Shevet Kol Kol. So, to Rabbi Shimon says, every Shevet is called a Kol. So, if that's the case, what's the difference between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda said 12 Korbanos. Rabbi Shimon says 13 Korbanos. Says more Rabbi Yehuda, Mary says, Shevet Echel Kol Kol Shvatim. Rabbi says one tribe, if it has majority, is very populous, and it has a majority, so then that drags everybody else because he holds that majority of the populace or a majority of Shvatim. Rabbi Shimon Omer, no, ain't Shevet Echad Koros Shvatim. It doesn't work that way. It's got to be a majority of the Shvatim, not a majority of the populace. Okay, Modeh. Now, Rabbi Shimon concedes, although the Nusach Yerushalmi in the Bavli at the bottom says differently than me, but it seems to me that Moda Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon, and somebody says like me, I think, I forget who. But anyway, Rabbi Shimon concedes, even Rabbi Shimon who says that Beis does not bring its own korban, doesn't bring its own korban, right? Only the Shvatim bring. It still concedes that it has to be all based on a psak which emanated from the Sanhedrin Agadol Lishkas Agazis. In other words, it's not the tribal Batei Din, of which there were a head based in each tribe. They are not the ones who are liable. They're not the ones who paskin, right? Rather, once based in Agadol paskins, the elders of each shevet bring the korban. Okay. Says more Rabbi, it said, time of the Tanya. The logic of this Tana is, that it has to be from Lishkas Agazis, is because it says, the psak has come, Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah, it's got to come from Yerushalayim. Rabbi Shem Rabbi Binyamin Ben Levi. Rabbi says, Rabbi Binyamin Ben Levi, Chom Esayeh, the Pasuk sits, the man Namar, he who said, Kol Shevet V'Shevet Kol Kol. The each and every one of the Shvatim is called the Kol. What pasuk assists that opinion? It says, Goyu Kal Goyim Yemimeko. Hashem promised Yaakov is going to have a Goy and a Kol. Who's the one Shevet which is not yet born? Vadayin Lo Nolat Binyamin. Only Binyamin has not yet been born. So therefore Binyamin is called, I think even Rashi brings out Chumash. Binyamin is called the Kol. Okay? So even a single shevet. Just like they argue here, so too they argue about Korban Pesach Betuma. Tumahutra Betzibur, how we define Tumahutra Betzibur, right? The time of if the congregation was precisely half Torah and half Tomei, HaTorah Nosin Pesach Sarishon, the people who are Torah make Pesach Rishon in Nisan, but the people who are Torah Osim as Parsheni, they make Pesach Sheni in Iyar. Rabbi Yehuda said, HaTorah Osim, no. They both do it on Yudal Nisan. Because HaTorah Osim Latzma, but Tmeim Osim Latzma. Since it's half and half, so the people who are Torah do it by themselves, people who Torah do it themselves. It's like, since each half is not rove, so neither one cancels each other's out. So therefore, they both, they make time slots in the Beis Hamikdash and Erev Pesach, the Shech the Korban Pesach. So otherwise, you kill somebody from one of the sides. I guess I know. Somehow you have to get off kilter. Okay. So Amalur they said no, ain't Pesach Chatzoi. You can't make Pesach halfway. Either they all do it Betuma. Oh, Kulan Yasu B'Tara, they all do B'Tara, but you don't split up that way. Okay? Mani Omelo, who's the one who said this? You can't split it up. It's Rabbi Yehuda. it's Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the thing is, it's not our Rabbi Yehuda, and that's the Gemara is going to bring that up momentarily. It's a dark contradiction to our Rabbi Yehuda, because our Rabbi Yehuda holds each Shevet is called a kol. So therefore, there shouldn't be a problem in each segment of the community doing the Korban Pesach by themselves, right? One segment of the community should do it B'tumah and one B'tara, just like the by Parhel and Dover. Each Shevet should be separate. So to here, each segment of the community should be separate, right? So it says the Tani, where do we learn that? But Rabbi Yehuda does say elsewhere in other areas that in fact you cannot make such subdivisions. The Tani will learn such a case. If one of the two breads brought on Shavuos or becomes Tameh, or one of the sets of 6 loaves of the lechem upon brought every week becomes Tameh. Rabbi Yehuda said, Shnei mitzvah b'Yisrael, you got to burn both, because you can't do half and half. Shein koren tzar tzibur cholok. The Chacham want to say, no, you can divide it up. Big deal. Being a replacement for the half which came to me, don't cause the whole thing to get lost. Right? The one who's Tommy remains Tommy. The other which is Torah remains Torah. You can eat it. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is clearly the one who held that ain't korban tzibur choluk. So obviously it's a direct contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda's shita by us. Because Rabbi Yehuda's shita by us is that each Shevet is by itself, and it's a direct contradiction of shita by Pesach as well. Because Rabbi Yehuda is the one who said you can make half Torah and half Tameh, which is obviously consistent both on Yudal and Nissa. So obviously consistent with the shita by Parhel and Davar, that each Shevet is by itself. So to there, each segment of the population is by itself. So it says, you're right. Rabbi Yisrael Mishem Rabbi Yonah said, Marmani, Lahu, the guy who said it, it's not Rabbi Yonah himself who complained that you can't divide a korban tzibur in half. It's Chachamim who adopted Rabbi Yonah's shita by Menachos. Now, obviously, Rabbi Yonah himself would draw a distinction. He said, the korban tzibur cholok means in the korban itself. You can't have half the chalos tamei and half them tar, and it's like the chuya. It pushes off. It's like dichui. I meant the dichui, not the chuya. But whereas in terms of splitting up the congregation, so each one has a chashva kol by itself, right? So it's as opposed to the korban of the bread. But Lamaisa, the Gemara is not getting into that right now. The Gemara just assumes that it's Chachamim. We're going like Rabbi Yehuda asking like Rabbi Yehuda over here. Okay, so you can even ask in contradiction. That would be consistent, a legitimate question, since they're asking Rabbi Yehuda that he contradicts himself. Okay, the name it. Be that as it may. Halacha Zayin. Horu based in Vasu Shiva Shvatim, based in Paskin, and Shiva Shvatim, 7 Shvatim did the Avera, or Ruban or majority of Am Yisrael, Alpian, based in Psak. So the part, so Raimel Shitas holds one korban, one bull, Vavodah and an Avodah Mevim part of the one bull and one goat. Divrei Meir. Rabbi Meir said, Shiva Shvatim Shalchatu, in this scenario, 7 Shvatim sinned. If 7 Shvatim sinned, you have to bring all 12 bulls. Rubo Kekula. Okay? So it says, Rabbi Shimon says, Shmoina Pogim. Rabbi Shimon holds that the Shvatim are divided into themselves. And therefore, because that's Rabbi Shimon L'Shitasa previously. Rabbi Shimon holds, even though he holds Beis, it's ironic, because he holds Beis then brings its own korban, right? But nevertheless, he holds the Shvatim are each one a very separate call, right? So therefore, even a separate call, so therefore, that's it. 8. 7 for the 7 Shvatim will sin, 1 more for Beis, there is no additional 5 for the other Shvatim, right? Eight bulls and 8 goats. A bull and a goat per shevet, a bull and a goat for Beis. Now, what's fascinating to me is a little bit Alpi Kabbalah, very little Alpi Kabbalah, but the truth is that there's a whole issue in which is discussed in the Poskim about Nusach Sfard, Nusach Ashkenaz, where the person Sfard should switch to Ashkenaz or not switch. So Maisa, the logic to switch is based on a Kabbalah that they have, is that there are 12 shiurim in Shamayim for each of the Shvatim's tefillos to go up to Shamayim. And there's one additional shar, the shar HaKoilo. Shar HaKoilo is for everybody. So the Sephardim say their nusach is the shar HaKoilo.
That's what Nusach Hari says.
Not just Nusach Hari. Nusach Hari is a modification of the Nusach Sfard. Suppose Chassidish Nusach Sfard, right? There's the Nusach Arizal, which is very similar to the Sfard of the real Sfardim. Okay? So Rav Yosef, when he says all Ashkenazim should change to be Sfardim, he says, uses the same logic as the Lubavitchers, right? That their Nusach is the most
It's
Meduya.
in the preface to the English Tfilas Hashem.
Yeah, right. Right. So, we don't pass that way, of course. So, in any event, what?
We don't?
No, we don't pass that way. But, it's interesting that my grandfather, he became the Lubavitcher, Lubavitch sympathizer, I think in 1952 or 54. But he didn't start davening Ari until 63. And then he said to his kids, I'm not davening the Schari because I hold the Nussachari as a Chassid, because I hold it's more Meduyak. You know, it's more precise. All right, be that as it may. I'm not sure if I don't think it's more precise. But in any event,
Ron doesn't say that it's more precise. He just says...
no, it's more Kabbalistically legitimate. Right. So in any event, so it's interesting that the stress is the stress of seeing the Gemara here is on kohol, not and elsewhere the stress is on Ada. That's an important stress because kohol usually has to do with the congregational aspect, which has to do with some mystical aspect. Ada does not. Ada is more of a strict legalistic definition. So that's going to come up. So in any event, Rabbi Shimon obviously holds that each Shevet has its own derech and avodas Hashem. That's why each one is its own kohol. That's why never the twain shall meet. Rabbi Meir holds no, the kohol is only defined by the community of the entirety of Am Yisrael. Right? So therefore, it's interesting how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would be somewhat of a mystical approach in this, whereas Rabbi Meir would be more of a philosophical approach. I'm making this up as I go along. It might all be Narishkeit, but that's what I wanted to say. Do you see the difference? Right. So you see that there is some element of issue here.
So each one had their own customs.
Some element of issue whether we are, states' rights or federal system. How exactly works? Okay. Taya Shimon Lozam Mishmo. The Shilazah says, in the name of, I forgot who is this? Of name Remer. Chatu Shisha, if six Shvatim sin, Vehain Rubo, and then the majority of the congregation. Hashiva, or, well, for this he deduces that it's 7, Abish Ein Rubo, even if it's not the majority of the congregation, Arelu Chayavim. So in fact, either one is enough. We didn't say this previously. This is the way the Rambam passed it, so. Either type of majority works. Either majority of the electoral vote or a majority of the popular vote. Okay? That's another, it gets based in the Chayav of Korban. Okay? Yeah, but there's a catch. 6 in their majority is good enough. It's not enough if they're 5 shvatim. In other words, it's got to be 6 which are a majority, right? But not 5. So even, we said previously in the previous Gemara, said that Shevet Echad Goyre L'chol Shvatim, even that is only if there's 6 shvatim. Then one Shevet could put it over the hill, over the hump. But not if they're 5. Okay? Says Mara Rabbi Yisrael said, Masisa Amrakain, the Brisa says this. It says, Machti Shvatim Vad Rov Chlusin. Half of the Shvatim, as long as they're the majority. With the Kabbalah, and vice versa, Machtis Uchlusin, Uvad Rov Shvatim. Half of the population, and the Kavasah means that we infer from that, right? That half of the Shvatim also works, but they also have to be half the population works as long as it's over Shvatim. In other words, that which you said 7 Shvatim works. It's only those 7 Shvatim meet half the population. If it's less than half the population, then the electoral, so it's not pure electoral or pure popular. There has to be at least half of the other system for the majority of the one system to work. That's the Gemara's concluding. Okay, now I realize your Rabban's statement is a really separate statement. Just before Shir, I looked at the Yerushalmi and he has his own shot in this, but I didn't get enough time to get it down pat. So I'll just tell you what the Pekilian Ephraim says. Pekilian Ephraim says this is an issue in and of itself. Rabbi, and it's really should be going more to the next halacha. Yes, Rabban Amar she'il to the kohen Mashiach min hador. That which you say later on in the second parak, that a kohen Mashiach, kohen Gadol, who eats chalev, let's say, based on the psaka basin is exempt. Why? Because the kohen Mashiach only brings, we're going to learn later on, a kohen Gadol only brings a korban if he paskined and then commit an avera. If he just commit an avera stam, he doesn't bring a korban. Or at least not the special korban of kohen Gadol. He brings a korban of a commoner, but not a korban kohen Gadol. Korban kohen Gadol is only if he based in paskin for him, and then he went and committed the avera. Okay, I'm not based. Sorry, on the contrary. Or if he himself paskin said, I paskin this way, chalev is mutter, and then he went down and ate chalev. So says the Gemara.
But he paskin for himself. He didn't paskin for the call.
No, for himself, right.
But the people saw what he did.
No, the korban of kohen goes specifically for he himself. It's not like the korban of basin. So the Mashiach to the kohen Mashiach min hador Horayos based in min hador Horayos based in Gadol. Do we derive from here that it's dafka we're based in paskin for him that the based on Goro paskin for him that he's exempt from any korban, or what about Horayos based in Kotu? What about the psak of a minority of the Sanhedrin, of a small Sanhedrin? Whereas when it says that it's dafka has to be his, it's not the psak of based in his own psak. Is that true across the board? In other words, regardless of what nature the basin paskin for him, whether 70 or 23, or does it mean if the basin of 70 paskin for him, then he did avera, that's not to be his psak. But maybe a lesser basin, a basin of 23, or a basin of 3 paskin for him, and then he did it, that's considered to be tantamount to his psak, and he would bring his own korban. So that's Mar's question, and it's not clear. I'm sure the Yerushalmi gives a better, I'm sure to be sure. But it's probable that he gives a different shot, which may be a better shot, but I just didn't get a handle on it. Okay. If the basin of one of the shvatim paskin, and that shavet did based on that psak, hu chayev. That shavet is liable sharkol shvatim turim divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah. So it's interesting. As I said before, Rabbi Shimon paskins again. It's not like the Nusach Rabbi Yerushalmi Shebavavli Taban. Rabbi Shimon paskins. Rabbi Shimon says there are 13 korbanos, right? 12 for each one of the shvatim, 1 from the basin. He holds that the psakas come from the basin Agadol. That's what Mor said. His moedas comes from the basin Agadol. Mor said that on the Chabal base, but not Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds. I might have said it wrong actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I did say it wrong. I think I said Rabbi Yehuda concedes. It's not Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that 12. I mean, it's just logical, and I made a mistake before if I said it the other way. But I said it the right way because if not, I'm correcting myself now. Rabbi Yehuda says the 12 korbanos, right? Rabbi Shimon says the 13 korbanos, right? Rabbi Meir holds 1, Rabbi Yehuda holds 12, Rabbi Shimon holds 13, right? So according to Rabbi Meir, it's pashut, the psak can only come from the basin Agadol, right? According to Rabbi Yehuda, The psak can come from any, based on any shevet, because he holds the shvatim are bring separate korbanos, and there is no one unified korban. According to Rabbi Shimon, the psak has to come from the Beis Din HaGadol, right? Because although he holds each shevet brings its own korban, but there's still unifying korban, the 13th korban, or the 8th korban in the case where the 8th korban, where the case where let's say 7 shvatim are chayte. So it's interesting because Rabbi Yehuda holds. In Rabbi Yehuda holds that everything is very states' rights, right? But it's interesting that at the same time he holds that if 7 shvatim sin, the other 5 have to bring in korban. Rabbi Shimon holds a modified version of states' rights, yet he holds that if 7 shvatim sin, it's only those 7 plus Beis Din, not the other shvatim as well. Okay? So there must be some way for putting that together. I'm not sure what it is offhand. So amen. So it says the one. The more is going to elaborate on this a little bit further. It says the Mora. It says the Mishnah still rather. Holabeizin shalom min hashvatim also shevet apim also shevet uchay v'sharkol shvatim. Turn to Rabbi Yehuda. Chomrin say ein chayovin el royas based on a global. They're only liable on the psak of the central court. Shemar says you call. Adas Yisrael Yishku. The entire congregation of Israel, the Ne'elam Dover Meinei Eidah. And so he is hidden from the eyes of the congregation. The eyes of the congregation being the eyes of the assembly. The eyes of the assembly being based in Agoro. The Lord Adas also shaven, not the assembly, not the Eidah, not the court of that shaven. Rameo Me'amer says, Choyvaz Beistinu. Here's a beautiful Lumdisher Gemara. It's not the type of thing you expect from a Gemara. It's the type of thing you expect from a Gorgachev or a Brisker or Chaim Brisker. But he holds it's a Choyvaz based. Right, so it's Choyvaz based in, so therefore, one korban, right, and it's obviously the central basin. Right, Choyvaz Siburo. It's the Chiv of the Tzibur. What defines the Tzibur according to him? Even each Shevet defines the Tzibur, right? Every Shevet defines the Tzibur by itself. So that's why the basin of each Shevet creates the Chiv korban for that Shevet, right?
Tzibur is interchangeable with Kahal.
With Kahal, yes. Right. Rabbi Shimon holds Choyvaz basin v'Choyvaz Tzibur. 2 dinim, right? It's mamash or brisker tzvei dinim. There's a din of Choyvaz basin and a din of Choyvaz Tzibur. So therefore you need to have the basin passing for the shvatim, but then each shevet brings and basin brings as well. Okay? Says Mar Matan Rameir, what's the large Rameir? Now here's where Nema kan me'enei. It says me'enei in Vayikra. And Vayikra is talking about other Averos, other than Avodah Zarah. It says V'nelam dover me'enei alcohol. Okay, there it says, whereas in Bamidbar, in Shlach, it speaks about Avodah Zarah, and then it says Me'enei or Eidah. Which, by the way, Kohol, is a higher, more exalted status. Eidah is not. So therefore, the basin sins and makes an inadvertent mistake of something else. There's still Einei HaKol. So the concept of Kol is not fallen off of Am Yisrael. But if they made sin in Avodah Zarah, then they've gone down a notch. They're no longer Kohol, they're already only in Eidah, which is lower Madrega. So Naaman, so it says more, Nematar kan me'enei, Nemar hal me'enei. Ma me'enish Nemar hal based in. So what do we learn from that? Nothing much. All we learn is it's always got to be a basin. Okay, ma me'enish Nemar hal based in. One of them is clearly the basin. I forget which one. In Vayikra it says, somehow, Vayikra, we know for sure is about basin. I don't remember exactly how, but Pnei Moshe discussed it. So also here, it's talking about, by Avodah Zarah, it's talking about a basin as well. My time Rabbi Yehuda, what's large Rabbi Yehuda? Nemar kamed and Nemar lahalam me'enei. He also learns me'enei. But he says the exact opposite. He says by Avodah Zarah, the language there says Vasu Kora Eidah, which sounds like I'm reading just on Pnei Moshe, which sounds it's not just the Sanhedrin, which would be Einei or Eidah, but Kol Eidah means all of Am Yisrael. So it means it's a chiyuv not on the Even though in Vayikra Rabbah it stresses the Einei, in Bamidbar, not Vayikra Rabbah, in Vayikra itself stresses the Einei, in Bamidbar it stresses the Eidah. So therefore he doesn't say it's the same. He says on the contrary, he says it's the same because they're Shabbat, but he rolls it the other way. Instead of learning that since one is definitely based in, the other is definitely based in, he learns that since one is the tzibur, the other one is the tzibur as well. And how is it defined tzibur? Tzibur is defined as each and every shevet. Okay? So that's what he says. Ma me'eshem klahalan tzibur avkan tzibur. Ma'ita Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon also learns me'ene me'ene. Nemar kame'ene, nemar me'ene. And the truth is Rabbi Shimon, it makes a lot of sense. Because you have both elements. So because it says me'ene o eida, and it says kol eida. So from this we can derive both elements, right? That there's both the concept of the individual shevet, and the concept of the entirety of Am Yisrael. Okay? Nemar kame'ene nemar lahala me'ene. Ma'ene shnemar lahala beisna, ma'ene shnemar kam beisna, ma'ene shnemar lahala tzibur afkan tzibur. So we work with both. Man Marchovas based in, he who says the word coming upon based in Mevin. He based in brings. Man Marchovas Tzibur mi Mevi. Now, he who says Chovat Tzibur, in other words, Rabbi Shimon, says Chovat Tzibur, who pays for it? That's an important point, right? It's the Fidel principle. Who pays for the korban, right? So as the Pnei Moshe brings out, if it's brought by based in, true, the Gemara points out a line later, because of Trumas Alishka, comes from the country front, who pays for it if it's not from based in. So it says the Gemara, the Tani we learn Metil you Aleim Uboin. So the Gemara really answers that the answer is that the Brisa says that they would make a special tax upon the community, upon the Shevet, and bring it. Divrei should be Rabbi Yehuda. Should be Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbi Meir, because obviously Rabbi Meir holds it comes from the basin, because there's only one korban for the basin. Rabbi Shimon says, Mitrumas Alishka Hoyu Boy. This come from Trumas Alishka. So it sounds like Rabbi Shimon holds that even when the Shvatim bring, they don't bring it out of their own budget. They bring it out of the budget of the Trumas Alishka. So Rabbi Meir holds it definitely comes from Trumas Alishka. Rabbi Yehuda holds it comes from each and every shevet's own personal raising of funds. Rabbi Shimon holds even though each and every shevet brings, nevertheless it's paid out of Trumas Alishka. Okay, we'll stop here for this evening. So we'll Hashem next week, Lincolnwood.
Oh.